Mexican records got the lights down low. Souldisco where the groovy people go. Hit play, let the music flow. Old school beats with a modern glow. Oh.
Hello everybody and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. I do hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. At the moment it's absolutely melting hot up here in Germany, but I still do hope that we are having a great time. Therefore, this week we are featuring Honey and the Bees. Why there were actually two lineups of Honey and the Bees? Well, we'll discuss this after some needle drops.
You gave me something to look forward to. Now I see my bit of gold on my finger. What you do to me? Every day that goes by, the more I sit and cry. And though I try, I want.
In the mid-60s, especially in Philadelphia, there was a group of musicians who tried to develop a new kind of soul sound. And this sound would later on become the sound of Philadelphia. And what made this sound so unique was that if you compare it to Motown, which was very rhythm-driven, they tried to include more soulful harmonies and editing horns and strings, and also a more complexity in the arrangements of the songs. And one of those first tries was a lineup which was called Honey and the Bees. Actually, this was a group which was formerly known as The Creations, and those members were Fannie Lee Cobb, Lulu Martin, and Rita Graves. And they released their first single on the Academy label. And this single was called Two Can Play the Same Game, which was co-written by Phil Hurd, and Rita Grace had lead vocals on this one, Inside of Me, who had Fannie Cobb on the lead vocals. According to Phil Hurd, this lineup disappeared after the single release. Phil Hurd himself became a very famously known songwriter, producer. He worked with the likes of Bonnie Siegler and is a legend on his own. And I will feature him in future episodes of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. So after the disappearance from the first lineup of Honey and the Bees, the concept of creating this new sound was still in everybody's mind. And therefore, a new group was found to replace the original lineup of Honey and the Bees. And this group was originally called the Yams. And the Yams were neighbors' children who founded their own group and auditioned for producer Jerry Ross. And they had also their first single release in 1965, and it was called Looky Looky, Gonna Be a Big Thing, which was released on ABC Paramount Records. This single didn't do so much, so therefore they left ABC Paramount, and then they auditioned for the legendary Jimmy Bishop.
It's not everyone who grows up with childhood stories like this.
You open up the door, you'd see people like Gladys Knight, you see Al Green at the door. The Jackson 5 came over, we hung out, we barbecued.
Yeah, that was just a casual day for the Bishop family. Jimmy Bishop Sr. first became a radio personality at WDAS in 1963. He helped a handful of artists, especially black musicians, gain exposure. You may have heard of a few of them, like Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, the Jackson 5. They even called Bishop the Sixth Temptation member.
Well, Bishop was one that they all depended upon, called upon, looked forward to getting their records played, and having interviews with him.
WDAS's own Patty Jackson can attest.
When you think about the legacy of WDAS, Jimmy Bishop was that guy.
3 of Bishop's records that went gold include these: Earth, Wind & Fire, Hey There Lonely Girl, and Barry White. Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacey Garrity thinks they were stolen sometime in the mid-1980s. Then the Treasury got them in 2008.
Although we don't know where they were stolen from, and they were recovered in January of 1986 from a pawn shop, and that was part of a police investigation into a burglary ring that hit locations in both Philadelphia and Abington.
Finally, the records were given back to his ex-wife Louise and his sons today at WDAS. Jimmy Bishop Sr. is still alive and would be around 80, but his family does not know where he is after losing touch. However, they'll always have these records to remember him by.
It means a lot. It's legacy. I've got kids. It stays in the family.
In Ballackinwood, Karen Hua, NBC 10 News.
Jimmy Bishop suggested that they would call themselves Sugar and Spice, but later on he decided there are Honey and the Bees. But who was actually within this group? Well, we have on lead vocals Nadine Felder. We have Gene Davis, Cassandra Ann Wooten, and Gwendoline Oliver. In 1966, Honey and the Bees released their first single on Arctic Records, and it was called One Time Is Forever, which was actually written by Kenny Gamble. And if you're into the sound of Philadelphia, you know how many bells this name rings. So they released a couple of more singles, for example, You Better Go Now. On the B-side was now a well-beloved Northern Soul classic, Why Do You Want to Hurt the One Who Loves You? And also another single I want to point out is Love Addict. In 1969, Arctic Records closed its doors and Honey and the Bees found a short-lived home at North Bay Records, where they released a Christmas tune, which was called Sing Jing a Ling. Vince Montana took some inspirations from that tune when he released the salsa record Christmas Time in 1976. Also, this tune was leased to Chess Records, so you'll find one version of the song. They're both the same versions, but one release on the North Bay record label and also on Chess. This single really didn't do so much, and therefore they finally went to Josie Records in New York and also started to record and release a couple of singles. And finally, in 1970, they released their debut album, unfortunately also their last album, but here it is in all of its 70s glory. I really dig this cover art. This album in the last couple of years got quite the buzz, and this is because it somehow laid the groundwork for all future girl groups, at least coming out from the Philadelphia scene. And especially if you look at the lineup, and I read a few names for you, we have Norman Harris on guitar. We have Earl Young on drums. Earl Young was a significant figure in the disco scene, especially with the Tramps. We have Vince Montana. We have Leon Huff. We have Wilbert Hurt, just to name a few. Here you can see the back also with a stunningly beautiful picture of the ladies. So musically, that's an absolutely stellar record. We have fantastic arrangements, we have the strings, the horns, and also the vocals just blend in perfectly. So in my humble opinion, this album helped to shape the sound of Philadelphia. If you want to have an original copy of this album, like I said, in the last couple of years it increased tremendously in price. You need to pay around $500 to $1,000. Again, depending on the condition. But a reissue came out a couple of years ago and the vinyl is honey colored. What happened after the album release? Well, the album also didn't do so much. So not many copies were sold at the time. That's why it's quite rare. Therefore also the price which you have to pay nowadays to get a copy. Therefore, this group went to Bell Records to release 2 singles in 1972. And these singles were That's What Boys Are Made For, Has Somebody Taken My Place, Song for Jim, and Leave Me Alone. If you want to have copies of these singles, they are still out there and they are still available and affordable. These singles didn't do much on the charts, so therefore in 1972 Honey and the Bees decided to part ways. But that's not the end of the story yet. 3 members of the group stayed in the music business. And starting with Cassandra Ann Wooten and Gwendolyn Oliver, well, they later became part of a group that was very successful in the late 70s. And this project by Richie Rome was called The Ritchie Family. And if you're familiar, and I'm quite sure you're familiar with the song The Best Disco in Town, well, you hear these 2 ladies sing on those records. Gene Davis later on became a member of the group Facts of Life, a group we've already featured on this program. I still want to point out how significant and important this record, in my humble opinion, is for creating the sound of Philadelphia. Because as we've discussed, the personal on this album, which later on became each and every one of them legends in their own. Also, the vocals were just fantastic. So these ladies, they were so great. They fit in so perfectly together. And let's just start with the setting of this picture. So this reminded me so much of later groups which would come out of Philadelphia International, like the 3 Degrees, who had just 3 years later in 1973 their debut album on Philadelphia International. And in my opinion, their debut album is already a best-of album with tracks like When Will I See You Again, Dirty Old Man, If and When. So just fantastic tunes. And later on, we have the Jones Girls. So I think that these groups led all back to Honey and the Bees in creating this concept. And I think everybody who was involved with producing, and especially also the ladies who sang on this record, deserve a lot of credit for helping, for putting out the blueprint for the sound of Philadelphia. There is a CD release I would highly recommend to you, which was released in 1999, and it was called Honey and the Bees Dynamite. It features 5 unreleased tracks. All these tracks were remixed from the original master tapes by Mr. Tom Moulton himself, a remixer. I absolutely adore him. I wish one day I can do an interview with him, but I would highly suggest that you check out this CD. Also, this one is available and affordable. If you like that episode, I highly suggest that you check out the playlist appearing here, and I catch you on the next one.